Manic and Chill, happy Wednesday. We are live. It is October 22nd, 2025. Shane and I are back for the Byemageddon episode. There's a lot of buys. There's a couple times where there are 6 teams on buy. But Shane, welcome in. It kind of feels like this stretch. It started last week. We talked about it a little bit last week. But really like this 2-week stretch going into week 8 feels like this is the time where you're hurting the most to just find usable players that you thought you'd have enough to get through and you don't. And then you have 6 teams on bye, a couple injuries. I think the trade market is a little ripe. So welcome in, my friend. How are you doing? We'll plug some stuff a little bit later. A couple things I want to talk about, but how you doing tonight?
I'm feeling froggy. Awesome night. Been making deals, just to your point. I will say I dug into my rosters or my lineups a lot earlier this week than usual, right? Because there's a lot of times like I'll start sending out offers like Wednesday or Thursday because, I can usually wait because I don't have 87 guys on buy. But I have one team where I legitimately had 7 starters on buy this week, like 7 legit starters too, like 7 guys that I'm starting every week. It's fun though because it's like you need to figure out that there's a dichotomy where, yes, I really want to win this week, but what do I need to sacrifice to do that? And do I need to even sacrifice for that win? Is that this win that important? Because it feels like it, right? Because it's week 8. There's probably rosters where you're 5-2. You don't want to fall to 5-3, or you're 4-3. That's how math works. You don't want to fall to 4-4, whatever. So yeah, I just started sending out offers like really early this week, and it's sad too. Like people are sending me offers for, my Andy Dalton or my Tyrod Taylor or my Joe Flacco. And I'm like, yeah, I can't afford to move those guys in certain leagues. Like if you're asking for them, I probably can't afford them. I was able to move one Joe Flacco, but everywhere else, Marcus Mariota, Joe Flacco, Tyrod Taylor. Well, who knows about Taylor yet, but all those guys are going to end up starting, at least in one of my rosters. In some cases, I might have both guys going. I think I have one league where it's Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco. So that feels good. That feels real good.
Yeah, I have one where I just said it today, and I'm rolling out Andy Dalton and Carson Wentz. Exactly what I planned when I went into the year. But hey, when I looked at the team, I'm like, I don't have anybody else. And so this is the week where you kind of have to roll both of them out. I think the biggest thing, and I want to give a shout out, Pain Kills All SC2, new member. So thank you. If you want to become a member, do so. Hit the join button in the description. You get Dynasty Deal Show. You get the Trinity Show with Ray and I on Mondays. Those are the perks. $3.99 a month gets you in the door. But welcome in. Dynasty Deal Show Friday. If you want trades, we don't answer a lot of trades on Manic and Chill. Dynasty Deal Show is where we get them. So get them in early. Usually post the stream 12 hours before the show on Friday morning. So welcome in. Pain Kills All SC2. But back to your topic, Shane. I think this is the week where it's kind of highlighted where some of those roster construction principles come into play. Yeah. Like having extra quarterbacks. This is probably the best time to be able to move them because there have been enough injuries. There have been enough buys to where there's probably for the first time demand for those players. It's great when you have a bunch of backup quarterbacks and the starter goes down in week 2. But when that happened this year, do you know how many teams I clicked on and I go, ooh, they're without Joe Burrow or Brock Purdy and J.J. McCarthy. But then I looked and they have like Jared Goff, Michael Penix. You know what I mean? Like they have 4 quarterbacks. And I'm like, well, sure, they may not love the ones that they have, but they're not going to give up a third for a backup when they could just put Tua or Geno Smith or someone like that in. Now, what's interesting is the backup probably was as good as those guys I just mentioned. But I think the point being, you're getting into the point now where people actually have a need. So you're more likely to trade them. And then you also said, like, your team might have a need to make some of those deals too. So I have to say, one of the most fun things I've done this year, I don't have a lot of teams like this, but I have a couple teams that have basically been so heavy at running back that I've had to, and one of them is a 2 PPR for tight end league. And so like I went into the year with probably 7 good running backs and then 3 or 4 good tight ends, meaning like every time I need a flex, and this is a start 12, every time I need a flex, I'm just throwing in a tight end or a running back, right? And I went super slim at receiver because I had found some money at running back that I didn't necessarily expect to have. And so instead of leaning into trying to trade, because before the year, you couldn't trade guys like J.K. Dobbins or Ramondre Stevenson. They were better on your team than they would have got you anything in the trade market, right? Yeah. Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, like no one wanted those guys to the point where you could trade them for a receiver. So instead, I'm like, you know what, Shane? I'm just going to ride with a slim receiver build here. Guys like Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney, those guys will get me through the whole season. Nah, they didn't even get me through like a month. A, they're injured. B, all of them stunk. So it's like now I looked at my roster today. Literally, the team is in second place. It is smashing. But Shane, I don't have a single receiver. Oh. But you know what that's allowed me to do? That's allowed me to play in the market where I'm going and trading or getting guys off waivers and just starting them. I faced Ray last week, and my 3 receivers, I don't know if you saw this team, but my 3 receivers on this team last week, take a gander at who those 3 receivers were. I'm not going to make a guess because there's a million players, but here were my 3 receivers. Kavonte Turpin.
Love it.
Who I actually felt the best about because of the team that he was on, right? But he was actually the worst receiver. My other 2 receivers were Chris Moore and Van Jefferson, who I had just picked up off waivers in a 12-by-12, 32-man roster league. I'm going to waivers and starting guys, and guess what? I got 25 points between those 3 receivers and 1. So it's kind of allowed me to build differently and lean into the fact that, you know what you can probably find and not have to pay a lot for is a receiver. So I'm just interested in your thoughts. Like, do you think obviously you need to be right at running back and tight end to get in that position. But don't you feel like with the Trinity tool, especially, it's actually easier to go and like stream a receiver spot now than it was a couple years ago? And the market just doesn't pay the value you would want for a guy like Ramondre or Dobbins or Swift. Like, you just can't get what you want for those types of players. Because when you try to buy him, it's like, dude, I tried to buy Javonte Williams today. Somebody needed 2 seconds and a running back like Brashard Smith or Woody Marks. And I'm like, that's just not worth 2 seconds plus something else. But that's a fair ask. So what's your thoughts on kind of using receiver as the streaming position when everybody else collects value? I mean, especially tanking teams. Tanking teams try to collect value at receiver when they don't have anything else, right? Like they'd rather have a random receiver like a Brandon Ayuk because they think, well, there'll be a future window for him. Tanker would not even want to have like Ramondre Stevenson on their team. So it's interesting. Do you think you can play that ahead of the market for the next year or 2?
There's a couple things in play here, right? Running backs are starting to be the game's cyclical, right? So running backs are starting to be the premier position over wide receiver, to be quite honest with you. Every time we talk about superstar players, it's Bijan, it's Gibbs, it's maybe Genty. But it's players like that, like running backs that can break the week. James Cook earlier in the year, Devon Chain always. So I think running backs are actually getting a little more valued than they used to in the past. But as far as the wide receivers are streaming, I mean, there's so many guys that can give you that same type of production that, do I really need to sell out for certain wide receivers, like a wide receiver 2? Do I really need to sell out to get a wide receiver 2 on my roster when I could stream a wide receiver 4 and maybe get the same production? Not on every week basis, but from time to time. You know what I mean? And if it's the last flex on my roster, like we have a couple of that. Who did we traded for Tez Johnson, I think. And on that team, we've had Calvin Ridley, we have Kayshon Boutte, we had a couple other wide receivers like that.
Thank God for Kayshon Boutte. We've had to start him every week, and he's actually given us a decent number of points because we've captured them all. But continue.
Yeah, no, and Woo Bear. For every solid for every solid running back, there's 3 wide receivers. It definitely feels like that sometimes. I'll say I've been lucky this year to hit on the backup running back position, like Rashad White and Rico Dowdle were godsends to me for the last, 3 or 4 weeks. Is it harder to find, but can you find a wide receiver of that equivalency that, Rico Dowdle is probably an extreme case because you're generally not going to get a player that's going to be the running back one in their position or the wide receiver one backing up. But like, are there even wide receivers of that equivalency out there?
I think well, first of all, there are just more receivers. That's a fact, right? There are more receivers. If you study it, I don't have the data through the last 2 years, but I remember I looked at this from like a 5-year stretch of like 2017 to 2021 or 2022. And there's usually on average like 120 to 125 receivers in a season that post a top 36 week. Now you may say top 36 week, that's not really relevant, but if you're talking about start 11s, start 12s, like it's hard to hit on the 1 week that 100th receiver hits that top 36 week, right? But I think the biggest thing is finding your spots of when you need to take those chances and just playing the market, knowing that number exists, knowing that there is literally new receivers every single week. You'd think, every one of them would be rostered, but how many times have you gone to waivers and you're like, this is gross, but I'll pick up Chris Moore. I'll pick up Tyler Johnson. Like those guys could have a 15-point game, maybe not a 30-point game. And you also know that it's not going to sustain. There's a reason that they're being picked up now. It's because someone else is injured or something has shifted, but it's not long-term. But you already accept that, right? You accept that same thing when you go pick up Trey Sermon because Jalen Warren's injured. Well, he's going to be the backup technically. You know what I mean? Like it's still the same principle. It's just previously you never had the opportunity to use those guys. You're like, I don't really care to roster Tyler Johnson unless I'm going to pick him up and use him. If not, there's no point. So I think the sheer numbers, but I also think that we're seeing this, and I talked about this a little bit on the podcast, not this past week, but the week before. We're seeing more attrition at receiver than we thought relative to running backs, right? Like largely more receivers are A, getting injured, but B, there's receivers that the elite guys, obviously, when they have a situation that gets hurt a little bit, it doesn't completely kill them. But you know what does happen when a situation flips and it becomes bad all around? Everybody that's not really, really good falls off. Like it doesn't take much for, even an average wide receiver 2 or 3 to fall down to complete nothingness. You know what I mean? Like just think about how you felt about a guy like Darnell Mooney coming into the year or Jacoby Myers coming into the year. Like they weren't the top option on their team, but you felt comfortable enough with where they stood in the pecking order. But then look at like Jacoby Myers, for instance. Not only has he been hurt, but like as soon as his situation goes from the 15th best in the league to the 32nd best in the league or the 31st best in the league, he gets relegated from like a guy you could throw in to he's no different than the guy you could pick up week to week. You know what I mean? Like that's how quickly it can change. And that applies to even wide receiver 2s. You see a situation where a guy's a steady wide receiver 2, but then his quarterback gets injured and it completely wrecks everything to the point where you don't even want to start a player on that offense. So I just think it's an interesting strategy. And we've seen running backs where I think people now accept you don't need a backup running back to take all of the work. You need a backup running back to come in and just get enough opportunity. Even a guy in a committee, until they're not playing, you can kind of just roll them out there. And we've seen it with guys like Ramondre and DeAndre Swift's actually, this is his best season really that he's had, which is kind of crazy. But even with somebody like Dobbins or Ramondre, what did you learn from them this year, Shane? What have you learned with those types of players going into the year? You have to play them every week. You have to set your team up to where they are being flexed, right? Or they are being started. You can't sit there and go, I'm going to wait for some clarity in a backfield like Denver.
Well, yeah.
It may never happen.
Yeah.
So
you could have taken a shot on Javonte Williams in the offseason though, or at least you should have. And I did try to. I did try to buy into that Cowboys backfield when it was still murky. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong guy to buy into. But what did I really lose, right? I mean, I traded for Miles Sanders in a few leagues for thirds. I wish it would have been Javonte Williams because I would have hit right. But if you wanted to, you could have gotten Javonte Williams in the offseason easily. You could have gotten J.K. Dobbins in the offseason easily. You could have gotten DeAndre Swift. I think just because they're not sexy in name, or to your point, like they don't have clarity in their situations, people kind of beg away. People want to see, they want to know what's going to happen before they pay. And that's not always the best strategy when you're trying to buy low on something, right? You're trying to hit a lottery ticket. So most times not most times, every time it's easier to buy a lottery ticket before it hits as opposed to after it hits, right? Once everybody knows that it hits, well, then everybody wants it and its price is going to increase.
You're blowing my mind. Where do you know that they've sold lottery tickets that have already hit?
The post lottery market. You never bought them on eBay? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. This was a sure winner. I'm only asking for 20 times what I paid for it, you know? Oh, that's a good
one. Yeah,
one.
you know what I mean? Like but that's the point though, right? You can't buy a lottery ticket after it's already hit because no one wants to sell it because, well, it's worth something. It's not worth anything before it hits when it's just a lottery ticket. I mean, it's worth something, but obviously its value is kind of a mystery.
So talk about those players, though, that are not necessarily won lottery tickets, but there are players that, I mean, we can go through the list of guys that right now you're looking at, like where they stand in a current backfield, and they haven't really had a ton of clarity. I mean, think of like Tyler Algier, for instance. Okay. That was a good one. Rico Dowdle was a good one. Rashad White was a good one. Ryan Robinson is probably another good one, although he hasn't had the fantasy production. He's actually gotten touches. He just doesn't do it much with them compared to McCaffrey. But like those guys mentioned, nothing's really changed in their backfield. Sure, Dowdle had the 2 weeks, but like I think the key is looking at backfields going forward and not looking at them through the lens of I need the other guy there to get injured. I mean, when that happens, it's just a bonus, right? Like Ramondre is a better player now when Travion Henderson doesn't get used. But you didn't need Travion Henderson to not get used for Ramondre to be worth starting, especially if you are in a league with a start 11 or a start 12. Like, obviously, the deeper it gets, the lower this threshold is. But, like, you don't need – we always think before, their value is contingent on the backfield just clearing out for them. But how often is it where you actually see a guy like, let's just use Ramondre, Dobbins, those guys coming into the year? How frequently do you see a backfield where they just use the rookie and they get rid of the other guy entirely? Like, we think that happens all the time, but a lot of times it doesn't necessarily go that way. And guess what? Sometimes it goes the other way. So
I was going to say the Raiders, but yeah, it's not a lot.
But they didn't have a Rashad White or a Ramondre or somebody like that. They didn't have that type of player next to Genti. They signaled kind of what they were going to do beforehand. I'm talking more of like these gross running back committees or platoons that nobody really wants to buy in. Yet you kind of look at it and I go, Shane, I probably could have told you, because I have a ton of Rico Dowdle and Underdog. I probably could have told you that Rico Dowdle was going to average 8 points per game this year. I think that would have been like a fair projection with him as being the RB2, because he was getting like 11, 12 opportunities a game before Chuba got injured.
Right.
So if I'd have told you he's going to average 8.5 points per game for the year, you'd have been like, that's fine, but that's not relevant. But here's what that 8.5 doesn't really factor in is like, that's just the median, factoring in that maybe there isn't going to be more than a game missed by the other running back in the backfield. You know what I mean? Whereas I think you have to look at him going into next year. Like maybe we devalued a lot of these running backs all the way up to even some of the strong 1-2 punches, like the Jordan Masons, Aaron Joneses. I mean, Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard haven't been a good offense, but like that kind of fits the same bill. I think we devalue those guys. We don't consider those types as locked and loaded starters in some of these formats. Yet here we are in the middle of the season. You know how good it feels if you look to your bench and you have a guy the quality of even like a Tajay Spears or Isaiah Pacheco. You're like, that's not bad. You know what I mean? I'll throw that in. So I think we undervalue this range of player because people look at it through a dynasty lens of like, no dynasty value, no future value. Meanwhile, I have a question for you that lends to this conversation, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so this hits on a bunch of different topics, but I like this comment because there's a couple of them. I need to buy any running back on a potential good offense. I mean, Rico Dowdle was on a garbage offense. That offense was garbage before he started making it good. Like he was the difference. So I'm look, we do any running back on a 53. There's a reason for it because running backs get attritioned. I don't think that's a word. And they're eventually going to, hopefully be useful. Sometimes you have the years where you don't hit on any of them. And then you have years like this where, Rashad White if you had Rashad White, Ramondre Stevenson, Rico Dowdle, who else? A couple other guys like that in that range, you actually absolutely hit the nuts. But to your point, a lot of times in the off season, our thought process is so myopic that we don't look at, well, you know what? I'm going to need someone for weeks 3, 4, and 5, right? We think in long, just a block. Like, well, this player needs to be good all next season to be of any value, instead of, well, if this guy gives me 2 or 3 starts, that's probably good enough. If this is a guy that I can stream during a bipocalypse, that's good enough. I think a lot of times we just think all or nothing without, I don't want to say realizing, remembering how much players like, DeAndre Swift end up being worth, how much players like Ramondre Stevenson end up being worth to your roster. Players like, let me give some more running backs, players like Jalen Warren, like I said, Rico Dowdle, not Chip Hubbard. He's a little high end, but you get what I'm saying. Like running backs like that, Tony Pollard. I know Tony Pollard isn't great or anything, but he had a few games where he was really fantasy useful to you. It's going to be guys like Woody Marks next year, Justice Hill, maybe Trey Benson. But even if these guys don't get a full backfield to themselves from week 1, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be times when they're there doesn't mean that there's not going to be times when these players are going to actually be useful to your roster, because they are, you know what I mean? Because there's just so many injuries. It's to the point, like with quarterbacks, right? The reason that we roster all these quarterbacks is because, well, you never know when Carson Wentz, Andy Dalton, and Joe Flacco are going to be useful to you, and Marcus Mariota. Like if you would have said before the season that each one of those dudes got multiple starts, people would look at you like you're cross-eyed. So that was a rambling way to say that sometimes we just have to remember that, a player doesn't need to give me 17 strong weeks. If I get any strong weeks out of some of these guys, out of some of the players on my roster, that's probably enough.
Well, think about this. So I just pulled up a random league that has pretty basic scoring, right? So it's a 1.5 premium, but it is a start 10. There's no point per carry. It's just basically a standard scoring 12 by 10 Superflex Dynasty League, okay? And I looked at the median of what it takes. So the median scores of the playoff teams. So all the teams 1 through 6. So I'm not talking about barely making the playoffs, and I'm not talking about being at the very, very top. We're talking about literally the median of the playoff teams. All right. Mm-hmm. So I know I don't have graphics or anything, but I'll just kind of walk you through this exercise just to put it into perspective, because I think what we're trying to say is that we don't appreciate the variance and the attrition that goes through a regular season. We lose that lens when we get to the off season. We look at every spot and we say it has to be this threshold. Now, optimally, yes, but how many seasons go off optimally and go all the way to the playoffs and they stay optimal, right? Like that, you don't need that to win. You definitely don't need that to make the playoffs. So I'm just going to give you a random couple numbers and let me know your thoughts. So this is all the playoff teams in this league. Again, 12 by 10, 1.5 premium, very standard, like no other bonuses, nothing. So it's really like exactly how you would think of standard scoring that has PPR. So across the league, the average number of points scored by a playoff team in this league, 168 per week. Okay. Now you have 10 starters, so you can do the math. 168 divided by 10, that's about 16.8 per game, right? For every starter. Now, you also know that 16.8 at a high scoring position like quarterback is not that high. You know what I mean? Like you would expect, you'd hope that your quarterbacks are a little bit above that number. So let's just call it, if we go 168, let's just say you have average quarterbacks, that's putting you at about, 38 points per game from your 2 quarterbacks. So Shane, if I told you that it only takes, and this is not even just to make the playoffs, this is literally just to be securely in the playoffs, from your other players on your team, you need to score approximately 16 points from each spot. Now, that's on an average across the entire season. Mm-hmm. It's probably a little less. It's probably more in like the 14.5 to 15 point per game range. That's all you need in every single one of your spots. And you're looking at this as there's 17 weeks and I have 10 spots. So I need 170 games where I actually capture, let's just call it 15 points. And obviously you don't need every player to get 15 because there's going to be a week where a guy you have gets 30.
Right.
And then someone else can get a 5 and it offsets it. But just think about that. Think about, I know 15 points per game for a season, we think of as that's a high bar. But if you break it up and you think of, well, I don't need 15 points per game from Rachaad White. I just need 2 games where I'm starting him where he gives me 17, 18, 20, and he may give me an 8. And I hope that I'm as efficient as possible when starting those guys. But when you really pare it down, like, dude, it's not that hard to find 10 points or more with a random trade for a third in the middle of week 8. It may not always hit, but it wouldn't be that hard to find a player if you had the asset to go get that, to say, yeah, I can get a guy that's going to give me 11 points, 12 points, because we're talking 15 being the average. I don't need 12 if I have Bijan Robinson in my other running back spot. Yeah. I only need 7. I only need 8. So if you think about it that way, like, I think we overestimate how much it takes to actually win. We go into the offseason and we're like, Shane, I need an upgrade at my wide receiver 3. I need an upgrade in my flex.
Mm-hmm.
I need a guy that's going to give me 16 points per game for the season. It's like, no, you don't need that right now. You don't need to pay the dynasty price to get that at every single spot. 4 or 5 spots, sure. But I kind of feel like the trend is to really build your teams around flexibility, especially if you're in a league with an active trade market, where the teams that are going the other direction are willing to give these commodities to you as you need them during the season. And then B, a league where you can trade for as long as possible. So obviously, we get roster reviews, and if you want one, hit that roster review QR code if you're interested. But some people will say, oh, my trade deadline is week 11, week 12. I'm like, dude, that's like in 3 weeks. That the league hasn't even emerged in terms of who's going to be contending or not. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you already have your trade deadline. So something to think about. I think we think of Dynasty as very much in the offseason. Every spot has to have a good asset or a really good player. And then doesn't end up being that.
Right. So there's only so many hammers, right? There are.
Yep.
And look, you thought you had a hammer if you had Justin Jefferson. You thought you had a hammer if you had
Brian Thomas
up until the last 2 weeks. Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, and whether it's injury or otherwise, they're not that. But when you do hit on that, yeah, like to your point, Bijan Robinson, CMC, guys that are getting you 27 points a week or whatever, they can blow up for 40. Yeah, you don't care as much when your running back 3 or your flex 4 only gives you 8 points. I'm just trying to look at some of the fantasy scoring. I do wonder, like, are we getting to the point where we care about depth more than we used to in the past? Or do we care less about depth because we think it's more streamable on our offense?
You know what I care about? Access to depth. Not depth, access to depth. And it doesn't just mean I can get it from somebody else. I can always get depth from other people. I need to build my roster in a way where I have access to it and be at the mercy of a trade market that can have some, I don't want to say selfish managers, but there's a lot of times. How many times this year have you tried to trade for something to fill in? And immediately, it's the old saying of, as soon as I say that I want it, you're going to hold on to it a little bit tighter. As soon as I say I want to get this player and I think a second is a fair value, the response is, well, best case scenario could be this, so I'm not going to do it for that price, even though that's probably the agreed upon price, because it really shouldn't go for any more and it shouldn't go for any less. There isn't really a debate on what the price is. Like, I'll give an example. Rachaad White.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as Bucky went down, I'm like, I'm willing to bet on the Bucky injury being more than a couple games. I'll give a second. Right. And in some circumstances, it was like, I need a little more than a second. And that's where I have to decide, do I have the flexibility to pay the little bit more? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But in that case, as long as I had access to get it when I needed it, that's one starter spot that I probably did not even really need to worry about outside of the opening game or two in week 1 of the start of the season.
I was just going to say, with this week, and this is kind of, it's the Byemageddon, right? How much are you not willing to trade to people that are in your stratosphere in the rank, in the league record wise? I can't speak English tonight, but whatever. So I have a guy that's I think I'm in 4th and he's in like 5th. and he wants to trade a quarterback from me, and I have him. I have enough that I could trade him that quarterback. You know what I mean? Take the couple third round picks and put it in my asset bank. Yeah, whatever. I put it in my bank, hold on to those assets. But then I'm helping him win this week. I don't want him to win this week, right? I want him to lose. So what's more important? Is it getting those thirds, or is it hoping that he'll lose? I mean,
there's not a right or wrong answer. There's not a right or wrong answer. But I think the rule of thumb is generally I'm not unwilling to help a team like that. It has to be something that I can help myself with later. You know, you can't trade somebody a player that they need and go, you know, hey, I'm going to patch your back, but if I ever need some help, you're going to help me out. Like, that's collusion. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think garnering that type of trade relationship in market in your league can be beneficial. But I think the rule of thumb is I need to get something that can help me at the time that I need it. Mm-hmm. Meaning if I'm also contending and I also could find myself in that exact same spot in 2 weeks, I need to get something that not in a year, in 2 weeks that could maybe help me get the same type of deal if I need it. So typically that does have to be a pick that I could probably make the same move back in a month if I needed to do it. I just made a deal like that where I traded somebody that had no quarterbacks. It is actually in 5th place and I'm in 3rd. I traded them Andy Dalton and Marcus Mariota in one trade. But I had to get back a third, and I had to get back 3 more backup quarterbacks because I'm trading away from backups that I have built a certain way. You know what I mean? It could easily be me next week that needed to use one of those backups, and I don't have them now because I'm trading them to you. He wouldn't give me 2/3. So I'm like, you need to give me more backup quarterbacks instead of the thirds. But it pushed my team forward, and I didn't need those guys in the short term. But that's the type of, you have to do a deal that helps you. What doesn't help you is someone offered me Isaac Tesla for a fill-in quarterback. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help me get something in a week or 2 if I need it.
Well, so by the same token, this isn't the end of the bye weeks, right? I'm going to assume this is the worst of the bye weeks. But I traded, I think I said it on air. I don't know if I did, but I traded Jacoby Myers for Andy Dalton. So someone got a usable wide receiver in theory, because he hasn't been this season, or I wouldn't have been willing to move him for basically nothing, except a 2 or 3 week starter. But they're able to get someone that in theory, maybe he gets traded, that they could actually use in their lineup, as opposed to Andy Dalton, who they didn't need. If they needed him, they wouldn't be moving him.
Well, wouldn't that be the out evaluation on Jacoby Myers? Is if someone offered me that, maybe you don't have a third, but you're willing to give him, I can at least see a path where A, he's usable, right? B, he goes to another team and there's a little bit of a market demand that gets created for him. So you just have to analyze that trade. If you're a contender and you're trading to another contender to fill one of their holes, you have to get back something that in the short term you can convert to value to if you need to. The sucker deal is here. You know what I'm going to give you, Shane? Kyle Williams. He's going to be good in 2 years. I promise. Yeah. Like that. That's not the type. I don't care if he could be worth a second in 2 games. That's not the type of asset I want to get back, even though somebody would say, oh, Kyle Williams is worth a third. I need the asset I can convert more readily if I need it. I think that's the key. Like, it has to just help you. If it helps you, I'm fine helping somebody else.
Yeah, I just wanted to put this up there. Lax 7662. I do the trade, and he did specify if it's a good trade. It creates good relationships down the road. Well, that's the push and pull, right? So when you're looking at this trade offer and you're like, you know, you're thinking of it from many different facets. It's well, it helps this person right now, and you know, there's 6 playoff spots. So in theory, we're not fighting for the same playoff spot. That's how I could justify it to myself, right? It's not the same playoff spot. We're just fighting for each one of us wants one of those 6 or 7 or 8, whatever it is, depending on how big the league is. So that's definitely one of the considerations. And it's, you know, how do I say no to this person without alienating them? Because there are times, you know, I send offers to people and this is what kind of not really on topic, but people have players on the trade block, right? And you send them an offer and it's a fair enough offer and they just reject it and nothing. Well, then why do you have the player on the trade trade block jerk off. Like, what are you looking for exactly, right? Like, you get a fair offer for someone that you have on your trade block. I don't know, do something, say something. Like, I feel like the stick meme where I'm poking at you, like, do something. Anyway, I forget where I was going with that, to be quite honest with you. So I'm just going to defer back to you. I got distracted by myself.
That is all right. I'm actually looking. Now, this could be a future show that we did, but who has the highest scoring standard PPR game this year?
Standard,
not standard. I just mean PPR, no premiums or anything. Like, who has the highest scoring?
Which player?
Which player? Yep.
I'm gonna guess
quarterbacks as well.
Well,
quarterbacks are in here as well.
It wasn't Jackson Dart last week, was it? 4
of them happened this week.
It was Jackson Dart, Bo Nix, Christian McCaffrey.
Gotten 2. Christian McCaffrey is the 4th.
Yeah,
Jamar Chase was the 6th. Bo Nix was the 2nd. All of those happened this week, and then the other one was Jahmyr Gibbs. Just happened this week.
Okay, how did I forget Jahmyr Gibbs? Yeah.
Oh yeah, those 4 happened this week, but you still have not guessed the highest scoring week of the year.
Everyone else is saying it, so I'm not going to say it.
It is Trey Tucker.
Yeah,
Trey Tucker still has the highest scoring game of the year.
3 receiving touchdowns and 100 and something yards.
8 for 145 and 3. Yep.
Not bad. Not bad.
We have Rico Dowdle has 2 of the top 20.
Yeah, I should know that because, again, I have Rico Dowdle in a good majority, not a majority, but I have him in a very nice share of leagues. That dude has basically carried a couple of my teams through weeks that they probably shouldn't have won.
Kenneth Gainwell still has the 27th highest scoring game of the year. The classic Jaylen Warren was ruled out at the very last minute, and no one started Kenneth Gainwell and complained about it. Russell Wilson, has the 6th highest quarterback game of the year, and that people probably forget that game existed. But so these are just names thrown out: 2 Rico Dowdles, a Kenneth Gainwell, a Russell Wilson. It just shows you that even if you look at the top 60, 70, 80 games across the season in terms of individual games, like, 5 to 10% of them come from players that we would have never advocated having on a team ever. You know what I mean? You'd never be like, I need to have some Kenneth Gainwell shares in Dynasty.
Yeah, but you know what? You should. And it doesn't, again, it's not Kenneth Gainwell specifically. It could be Kenneth Gainwell as the proxy. But you should be looking for players like that, right? I think a lot of times we draft players in the 3rd round, we're shooting upside, right? We're telling ourselves, well, Kyle Williams, I guess he's just going to be the dude we pick on. Someday, maybe he could be Drake May's favorite wide receiver. I understand that his draft profile is not great, and he's drafted in the 3rd round of rookie drafts, but maybe. And you know what? I've traded, or I'll trade to get that pick. I've traded Kenneth Gainwell, J.K. Dobbins, etc. I don't know. It just makes you think or wonder, should I be spending those 3rds? If I have them, should I be spending them on low upside or low hit rate types of players in the rookie draft? Or should I just be moving them for players that, they're not sexy, but I know they're probably going to give me some weeks? And, Calvin Ridley was one of those players where we would have failed if we thought it was Calvin Ridley, but there's also Trey Tucker and stuff. Yeah,
I think the key thing, and this is something I'm going to do a report after the end of the year on, is what I would call like the nuclear week, meaning like it's from a non-quarter. So we're just taking out quarterbacks here because quarterback is its own, quarterbacks are not competing with your last flex spot
generally
for a place. So take out quarterbacks. The nuclear weeks are the ones where it's like 25 or more PPR points from a skill player. And that's where this gets really interesting, because with a lot of these names, I can give you right now, how many games this year have been of 25 or more points from a skill player. So not a quarterback, but a tight end, a running back, or a receiver. How many individual games of at least 25 PPR points have happened this year through 7 weeks?
So it's probably a lot.
Sean says over 30. That is correct. It is over 30.
It's well
keep going.
That.
Yep, keep going.
I think it's close to 100.
It's not 100. It's somewhere between 30 and 100. It's actually almost right in the middle. It's 68 games of 25 or more points. And just looking at some of the names on here, a lot of them are the household names you would think of, right? The same names over and over, even when they're not, they're guys like Mark Andrews had one, and Zay Flowers had one. And like, even if they're not elite, they still have a couple mixed in there. But I think the biggest bang for your buck, and I talk about this almost every damn week on Destination Dynasty, is when you have, and you feel it when you've had these results, right, Shane? When you had the team that captured those Rico Dowdle games. Now, you should have started Rico Dowdle every game that he started, but there were people that didn't necessarily do it the first week, even though they probably should have. But running backs are very easy to kind of spot, when to throw those guys in or not. But especially at some of the running backs you didn't see coming, like the Kenneth Gainwell game, some of the receiver games. I mean, if you had Romeo Doubs the week he went up against Dallas, almost 30 points. If you caught the Aronde Gadsden week this week, if you caught that one, if you caught the 2 Hunter Henry weeks that he's had, if you caught the Wan'Dale Robinson 28.2 point game week, if you caught the, how about this one, Shane? The 2 Kayshon Boutte weeks we already talked about. One of the reasons that team is even in the playoffs is those 2 Kayshon Boutte games, Shane. Nothing else. We knew what we were expecting to get out of our other starters, right? Baker, Bijan, our starting tight ends. I would say right now we could probably look at the 2 Kayshon Boutte weeks that we captured, both of them. Those are weeks that probably have us in the playoffs. That one game alone, or those 2 games alone, like, think about how much of a value it is if you captured Pat Freiermuth's game last week because you were forced to play him. That one game that pays off Pat Freiermuth's potential usage or value for the rest of his dynasty career. That one game, and if you didn't start him, there's no way he'll probably ever replicate that for your team. Like, that's how crazy the swing is, and we just don't really ever talk about things like this. So,
well, sometimes though, also if you're in a position where you're purposely starting Pat Freiermuth, your team's probably not doing very well. It's just not. I can't imagine that it is. Kayshon Boutte, I mean, I guess it depends upon the roster construction, right? For the roster that we have, well, a couple of the rosters that I have, it makes a lot of sense that that's the type of wide receiver we have, because we invested heavily, or I invested heavily at running back and or tight end, depending on the premium. And I said, all right, well, the wide receivers, I'm fine with, before the season, Steph Diggs types. I know he's had a couple blow up games, but nobody was really excited about him. But, the Kayshon Boutte types. But you do wonder if you are getting all those weeks from like a Pat Freiermuth, because that's really down there in the gutter. Like, if you're starting Pat Freiermuth,
take out tight ends, just because I do agree that some leagues tight ends have a lot of flex value. If it's like a 1.75 or a 2, other leagues you would never even have put him in, even if you had 5 injuries. Like, you would hope you'd never have to put him in a regular PPR league, right? But just think about the receivers, right? Think about guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs, Keenan Allen. I mean, Keenan Allen's a little different because he's proven it before, but like Wan'Dale, Romeo Doubs, Kayshon Boutte, you would have put those guys in the, if I would have told you I'm starting 2 of those guys every week, you would have called my roster trash before the season. If I'm starting Romeo Doubs. And Romeo Doubs for the year may not average more than 11, 12 points per game at best. But you know what? In that average, there's going to be 3 or 4 of these games where he well outpaces a lot of the other players that people were paying 10, 20 times the value to get on their team. And that's where the math just doesn't make sense. So it really comes down to, what's the lesson learned? If you have those receivers in that range, even though they may not be locked and loaded wide receiver 2s, 3s, flexes, you do have to give yourself on your roster an opportunity to play those guys fairly regularly. That's the key. If you had 7 receivers better than Wan'Dale Robinson, you've probably not even gotten to his name yet on your roster to where you've had to start him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's a build problem. It's a construction problem. And that's how we've captured the Bouttes. That's how we've captured the Keenan Allens, because we just were like, well, we don't have anybody else. You have to give your roster that chance to work for you. Tez Johnson, now that's a perfect one.
And I'm guilty of this. Sometimes we think that the difference between a wide receiver that averages 11 points a game and a wide receiver that averages 14 points a game is bigger than it really is. Because, to your point, there's games in there, there's weeks where, I'm just looking at the scoring now, like Romeo Dobbs. Romeo Dobbs has a 30-point week, or I think it's like 29-point week, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Yeah, there's Trey Tucker's 40-point week. That's wild. Anyway, so you guys like Wan'Dale Robinson Wan'Dale Robinson, 11.5 1 week, 28 1 week, 3, 4, 8, 20, 15, 13.1 points per game. Is that less valuable than, I don't know, someone that's a little more consistent like DK Metcalf? Now, DK Metcalf's best week is 23 points, and then he has a 19-point game. But everything else outside of that is pretty pedestrian, 12, 11, 12. You know what I mean? So it's like we kind of overvalue a wide receiver that averages 11 points per game versus a wide receiver that averages 9 points per game, because we just look at the overall aggregate of it instead of looking into how they got there. Like, we should be looking for spike weeks, right? Especially at our last flex positions, our last wide receiver positions. Those are the types of players that we should be wanting to put in our flex, not the guy that's going to consistently give us 12 points a game, because that's generally not going to win a week.
Well, I just picked two players that kind of fit this bill, Devontae Smith and Romeo Dobbs, right?
Right.
Now, Devontae Smith is probably a good lock coming into the year. He's going to probably give me 13, 14, 15 points per game. He's better than Romeo Dobbs. He's a better receiver. But then you look at their distribution through the first 6 weeks or 7 weeks of the season, and Dobbs actually has had more games where he's over 10 points. I don't care if you score 11 points or 7 points. Neither helps me.
Right.
I do care of how many games you score 20 or more. And literally the difference between 14 points per game and 11.5 points per game is maybe 1 or 2 games where a player was at 15 instead of 10. You know what I mean? Or 9 instead of 3. But for the most part, if you look at those actual spike weeks or nuclear weeks, generally they're not that different. But where the difference comes into play is you were more likely that Devontae Smith, 14 points per game you projected before the season. What were you more likely to do if he was on your dynasty team? Capture every damn one of those weeks.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to get the 14 points per game from him because you were going to start him as your wide receiver 3 every week, because you're like, he's a good player, he's consistent, whatever the argument was, you're going to put him in. You go down a tier or 2 and you're going, man, I don't even know when to start Romeo Dobbs. 1 week it's 4, 1 week it's 20. You know what I mean? And you have to set yourself a roster. You have to set yourself up to capture the minuscule difference between those two players. But really, we feel it differently because one, we're more likely to start because of the name, because of the previous profile or whatever. And the other, we immediately classify as volatile. So something to think about. It's a fascinating thing. And then you don't even get into the argument of how easy right now is it to go find. If I told you, Shane, could you go buy 10 points or more this week at wide receiver? Could you buy that for a third? I bet you could.
Well, yeah, but it's not a guy that's probably averaging that.
No, it doesn't. I'm saying for this week, if you had to go make an educated bet, you could probably go find a player with a good shot of getting you 10 points or more at receiver for a third.
Oh, yeah.
The key is you don't have 20 thirds, so you can't do it every week. You have to try to kind of buy on the margins. Maybe can I squeeze out 2 weeks from this guy or 3 weeks? I mean, that's where the bouteilles are so valuable because they obviously stay in that range for almost the whole season. We've committed to playing him every week, but we also could have committed to playing him well past. He could get benched, you know what I mean? And then you're like, how long do we commit to play him? But you get extended value and you didn't have to pay a lot for. So getting into the weeds, but anyway, what do you want to talk about? We're almost 10. We're almost done.
Yeah, let's here you go. Is Josh Reynolds good for 10 if Wilson is out? Is Tyrod Taylor the quarterback? Because Justin Fields might not be able to get him there, to be honest.
Honestly, I bet you there's going to be at least one Jets receiver that goes for 12 or more. Probably Josh Reynolds or Tyler Johnson. It'd be one of those two. They're facing the Bengals. That's one of those guys that for one given week, given the matchup, given the situation of what they have out there, that's the kind of week where you legitimately could debate putting one of those guys in over a more known quantity, which is wild. But how much does it cost to get one of those guys? Nothing.
This isn't in regards to the 3rd round draft pick. This is just people talking about Tez Johnson is kind of that pop guy now. You ain't getting him for a third.
Let me say this, then you can get to a few questions. Here's where it gets tricky. I love Tez Johnson now. because his situation is great, right? The only thing you're betting on him is can he maintain a role. But here's the problem. When you go try to buy Tez Johnson, Shane, there's a little bit of like a dynasty premium price you have to pay.
Yeah.
I don't want to, if I'm looking for a 1 or 2 week filler, I don't want to pay anybody's dynasty price. I want to pay okay, maybe I have to pay a 4th and some fab or a 3rd, but as soon as you start telling me, oh, he's going to be their wide receiver 2 next year, I don't want to pay into that. That's the antithesis of what we're trying to do here.
Sean, who are you trying to give up for a 3rd? Send me the offer, Sean, anyway, in Fight Club. Yeah, I get what you're saying, Scott. Yeah, let's just hit a couple questions before we rock out or roll out, I should say. This is good. This kind of speaks to what we thought we knew, what's fact, and the whole dynasty value part of it. Like,
Shane, are you doing this? I'm just going to shut up and let you answer it.
Henderson for Scadaboo? Yeah, I'll do that. Henderson's just, he's got, I don't want to say he has no value, but his value is absolutely cratered. And Scadaboo has already bought himself some insulation for the rest of this year. At least enough insulation that if I think it's going bad, if it's turned left, like when the Eagles absolutely shut his non-athletic ass down on Sunday, and he goes 10, or I'm sorry, more likely 20 carries for 40 yards. People will still go, yeah, but that was just one bad game. Like, he has some insulation there. So yeah, I would do that. I mean, here's the thing I like about Scadaboo. I used him as a premier asset in a big trade I made today in our Variance Bowl league. So now I'm out of him, so I can't. But I think you should move off of Henderson for Scadaboo. Like, what do you think? Like, what would be the argument against it?
The argument against it, I mean, I think I talked about this. Can't remember what stream it was on. Might have been on Monday with Dynasty Takeaways with Brandon. But the only way you get burned on this trade is if Henderson completely outpaces the cohort that he's currently trending to be in, right? Like, you've already had to move the goalposts. Like, the thought that he could be the next Jahmyr Gibbs or the next Bijan, like, that's probably not happening. Doesn't mean he can't be good. Doesn't mean he can't be very good. But wouldn't you guess if you had that guy on your roster, Shane, you'd see a little bit more from him? Even Jonathan Taylor's rookie year, at least they used him. He wasn't great, but at least he got, 8-10 touches a game. But like, are you fairly confident in saying if you trade Henderson away, you're not trading away the next RB 1 or 2 in Dynasty? Are you comfortable making that bet? Doesn't mean we couldn't be wrong. We could always be wrong. But that's the big risk if you trade him away. Anything below that, all you're really doing is playing the day trading, month trading, season trading game at running back. And we could easily get in the offseason and go, you know what? I like what Henderson did at the end of the year. I'd take Scadaboo over him. But I can live with being a little bit below what I traded away in that range. You know what I mean? Right. As long as I have a usable running back for the next year, I'll figure it out then. Like, I'm not going to get completely burned on that trade. And that goes for any like RB for RB swap. I just don't see the downside, especially if you have a lot of leagues. Like, what do you have to lose by trading away a Henderson share? You know what I mean? Are you really that scared you'll never be able to get back in? Or are you scared that your dynasty brain will never allow you to get back in if other people start propping them up again? That's the fear.
All right. Ooh. Here's just a start sit one. Need a wide receiver badly with all the buys. His choices are Jaden Higgins, Isaiah Bond, Josh Reynolds, or Chimere DK is how you pronounce his name correctly, apparently. It's not going to be Isaiah Bond. Could be Jaden Higgins, right? Because Nico might not go. But for me, I'm going DK. I'm shooting the ceiling. That's what I'm doing. I don't know about you, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, my first tiebreaker, and this will be a sneak peek of Destination Dynasty this week. I'm going to do a offensive environment episode. My first tiebreaker would probably be which of these offenses is good, Shane? Are you excited about any of the offensive situations or quarterbacks? And honestly, the answer is no for all 4.
Absolutely not.
So there is no tiebreaker there where it's like a decent situation, right?
No.
I think you can eliminate Isaiah Bond. I think that's probably, believe it or not, the worst situation of the 4, which is crazy, but I think it probably is, just given their quarterback and they're on the road. I'd probably go I'd go Higgins or DK, but I don't even feel good about Higgins. Like you could easily see Christian Kirk come back, and it's like Higgins is still the fourth option, you know, and you know what though, you could sell me on Reynolds. He plays the Bengals. It's by far the best matchup of the four.
It is the best matchup. That is the reason that I was going to stick Tyrod Taylor in over Cam Ward until there was news that Tyrod's knee was acting up today. But if Tyrod's going this week, I'm playing Tyrod over Cam Ward. Yeah. Just it is what it is, man. Ricky won. I just like some of this comments. Like I'd like to think everyone is that important when 8 or 9 wins could mean playoffs. You know, I like to see that because you know what? It kind of justifies me. I don't give up a lot of weeks. You know, there's a couple leagues I look at and I go, yeah, you know, I could just eat this L this week, right? Because I'll be fine the rest of the season. You know, I won't have a bye week like this that's affecting my roster. But I don't know what's going to happen the rest of the season. You know what I mean? Like there's players on my roster that could get injured, and those wins that I think I would have had later in the season, I'm not going to get. So my whole goal, not my whole goal, but one of my goals when I'm making my trades with Sleeper is seeing that match thing go from red to green or from slightly green to significantly green. You know what I mean? Where I'm the favorite. So I definitely take that into account on a lot of the deals I'm making in season, but I'm not selling myself like my long-term assets short. I don't think. Maybe I am. I don't know. I traded Marion Hampton in a league this morning for Jordan Addison and QJ. Start 11 in the midst of it. I don't know. What's the crowd think?
I mean, that is I think a bigger boy deal, but to your point before, like I've just kind of started looking at things a lot more broad in terms of we don't know what we don't know going into the season. And it actually, especially if your market reacts, I mean, we're in a lot of active leagues where if you really want to get something, there was a comment at the beginning of the stream about how I didn't really want to pay what it would take to get from somebody else. Like I don't want to always pay the iron price, so to say. Mm-hmm. But generally, if you're in an active market where people do understand the direction of their team, they understand the weekly and daily commodity markets of like, hey, I don't need this quarterback this week. I'll trade him to you for a fair price. You know, I'm not going to gouge you just because I can. Like you really should be looking at matchups week to week. Mm-hmm. Like there was a league today, Shane, where I don't have a second quarterback. Okay. I could use one. I'm in 5th place. But you know who I'm playing? The 12th place team. I'm already favored by 90 points. I don't need to make the trade today because I'm not making the trade for any dynasty reasons. I'm making it for this week. There would be another team where I'd make that exact trade if I needed it. But this team, you know what? I don't need a second quarterback. I'll just throw in a random receiver, a random tight end, and I'm still going to win. Right. Like you can literally play that. That is where dynasty really is a week-to-week game. And I think a lot of people play that way without knowing it. And you just never get that context when you ask somebody, hey, a dynasty question. Would you ever trade this for this? Oh my God, no way. It's like, well, but you probably would in the context we're talking about.
Unless the trade's just absolutely brutal. And you're saying no way. It's usually the off season when everybody's got these rose-colored glasses where winning doesn't matter right then and there. Or you're going to win because everything you planned is going to go correctly. Well, you know what? Guess what? It doesn't work that way sometimes. Sometimes Kyler Murray is your quarterback and he's played like ass and got outplayed by Jacoby Brissett. And now you're hoping that Kyler doesn't come back so that your 6 shares of Jacoby Brissett can be stuck in there. Oh, we got a super chat
in before the buzzer. Palmer
right before the buzzer. So thank you, Palmer Q. In a hard rebuild was offered BTJ and Marv for 2 late firsts, Ricky Purcell and Dart. Feel this could be a buy low opportunity. It's non-super flex 12-team start 8. Okay, so as I'm reading through this, I didn't see the end of that, and I'm like, oh, that's too much. Giving up.
Dude, the first part, I was debating already 2 late firsts and Ricky Pearsall, and then I'm like, Dart, no way. Ooh. And then you go, well, Dart has no value, and it's a start 8. So where are you on that? That's an interesting one.
So it's start 8. You're getting.
Let's assume QBs have no value.
No, well, basically they don't.
They have no value. Yep.
Ricky Purcell, I just want to point out this is part of the reason I didn't like him is because unfortunately he's injured a lot. That's been that way since college. Anywho, it's funny how people don't jump in my comments to anyway. Offered BTJ and Marv for 2 late first. So late first in this could be 107. Nope, it's 12 teams. Let's learn how to do math. Yeah, I'll do that. Two late firsts and Ricky Purcell and Dart for BTJ and Marv. And it's mostly for the BTJ. You know what? How do I just do the BTJ part of this deal? Can I give up a first and Ricky Purcell for BTJ and not pay for Marv? Because of the two, I'm actually less bullish on Marv than I am BTJ.
I think you can almost remove Dart from the equation, right?
Yeah.
Ricky Pearsall is, somebody you could throw into the trade, but it's not really moving the needle. And then you look at the value of the picks. Like if you really don't want to make those late firsts, that's probably a better bet to take the receivers, if maybe you only want to do one and hedge your bets. But I went from no way I would do this trade to, yeah, I would probably do this trade. The only downside is the opportunity cost of what else you could do with the picks besides this. And if you say, I'll wait 3 weeks and I'll be able to get 2 better players, then okay, do that. But this might be the best deal you get. If put it this way, Shane, if one of these receivers turns it around, you won the deal. Even if the other one just kind of is pedestrian, you know what I mean? Like if one of them turns it around, you probably won the deal in this format. So in that case, I would take it. You're taking 2 pretty educated guesses on guys that could bounce back and easily be traded for more.
Yeah, and just for what it's worth, BTJ feels like this time last year we're going to go, oh, I should have bought a lot more of him now that I knew that he needed wrist surgery and was shut down after week 12 or whatever it's going to end up being. So, yeah, this is up. His team's really bad. And he also has Hunter. That is a lot of faith to be putting into Trevor Lawrence. That does color it a little bit.
And I don't really care about that because, again, you don't want every player to hit. Well, you know what you want? You want one of those guys to ascend past the other one very clearly. If you think, here's the thing, if you think it's Hunter, then as soon as you get BTJ, go and try to find a cross-positional deal or a similar receiver and get out of the receiving room. But I think the bet value is pretty good to just take the trade and then move on and see what else you can get done.
Yeah, look, at first and Ricky Purcell for BTJ in a 1-quarterback league is... Again, I know obviously there's been 8 weeks of football, 7 weeks of football that color this, but if you would have said that to someone 9 weeks ago, they would have smashed accept.
Well, the key is the picks too, right? Like those picks are not super valuable other than what you can do with the market with them. So that's why I'm a little more willing to take those bets. And normally I'm always going to lean towards give me the flexibility of the first, but that's assuming a little bit of a different market. So good show tonight, Shane. I do have a request from the community. I posted this on Twitter. I posted this in our Discord. If you're not in our Discord, it's ddfantasyfootball.com or patreon.com/allgas. In the description, I put a Google form. We have a special event to be announced here pretty soon, but we're going to be doing kind of like a Dynasty Family Feud type of game, and I want to get as many responses from the community. So it doesn't take long. I assume you already filled it out, Shane. It takes like 5 minutes. It's not that hard to fill out. Just some basic questions like you'll see when you get in there. But if everybody could help out, just click on that Google form, answer the questions. You can remain anonymous. You don't have to give any information. I'm not taking your email or anything like that, but just want to get as many answers so we can have a fun game down the road that Shane and I will be a part of. So if you could do that, please do so. Like and subscribe. If you're interested in a roster review, scan the QR code. We're trying to do, a couple of those every single week as we get towards trade deadlines for people. And Byemageddon, go get some deals done. Make sure your lineups are strong for this week and live to see another week going into week 9. So thank you, everybody that watched. I'll see you around in the Discord or in the community if you're in there. Shane, have a great night. Go smash your sniper active dream for another week.
Oh, yeah. See you next year, buddy.
See you, everybody. Bye.
Later.